China launches its cargo rocket dubbed Tianzhou 6. Authorities say the rocket will deliver fuel, food, and other supplies to the Tiangong space station. More details on this later in the news. Good evening. I am Ricky Mathay. This is Matanang Agila International, and now for the headlines. President Ferdinand Marcos Jr. gladly shares his success in the 42nd Association of Southeast Asian Nations Summit in Labuan Bajo, Indonesia. The Department of Foreign Affairs said Australian Foreign Minister Penny Wong will visit the Philippines next week. Chinese warships sail for 12 days around Japan ahead G7 summit next week. China Foreign Minister Wang Wenbin claims G7 violates and breaks international rules. And Ukrainian Foreign Minister Dmytro Kuleba urges Latin American countries to condemn Russian aggression against his country. President Ferdinand Marcos Jr. gladly shares his success in the 42nd Association of Southeast Asian Nations Summit in Labuan Bajo, Indonesia. Christine Agila for the report.
President Ferdinand Marcos Jr. safely arrives in the country with First Lady Liza Araneta Marcos after landing at the Villamor Air Base in Pasay City. In his arrival statement from the two-day summit, the president says that he was able to push the important issues for the welfare and interest of the Filipino people. President Marcos adds that in his meeting with ASEAN leaders, he emphasized the importance of standing with the international rules-based system. The president also notes that the Philippines supports principles of free trade and a multilateral trading system. This follows the call to his fellow leaders to further enhance support for the nano businesses and be micro, small, and medium enterprises or MSMEs and the responding to the effects of climate change.
The Philippines expressed support for the community building efforts of ASEAN, including the strengthening of ASEAN's institutions. The leaders also discussed regional and international developments.
President Marcos shares his discussion with Indonesian President Joko Widodo to revisit the case of Mary Jane Veloso, an overseas Filipino worker who was arrested and sentenced to death for allegedly smuggling heroin into Indonesia.
I was able to say, we're still trying to work hard on that case. Sabi ko, the best that we can do, I suppose, is for her, for the Indonesian authorities to re-examine the case para lang naman as a favor to the Philippines.
Christine Aguirre reporting for Matanang Agila International. Trusted, connected, on point.
President Ferdinand Marcos Jr. is in talks with Vietnam regarding the country's exclusive economic zone. Martin Liachon for the details.
Upon arriving in the country from the 42nd ASEAN Summit in Labuan Bajo, Indonesia, President Ferdinand Marcos Jr. says he is establishing an agreement with Vietnam Prime Minister Pham Minh Chinh following reports of Vietnamese fishing vessels encroaching on Philippine territory. The president asked Foreign Affairs Secretary Enrique Manalo and his Vietnamese counterpart to come up with a solution to avoid raising tensions on the high seas. Between March 16 to 21, the Philippine Coast Guard or PCG reported spotting Chinese and Vietnamese vessels in waters around Sabina and Ayungin Shoals and Pag-asa Island in Palawan. The president urges all involved parties to abide by the 1982 United Nations Convention on the Law of the Sea to be certain that the West Philippine Sea does not become a nexus for armed conflict. The Philippines and neighboring countries such as Vietnam, Brunei, and Malaysia all lay claim to some territories in the South China Sea. In a 2016 arbitral ruling, the Hague-based Permanent Court of Arbitration overruled Beijing's 9-dash line, a separation that covers almost 80% of the South China Sea, is illegal. But Beijing ignores the ruling as it continues to build its presence in the disputed territories. Martin Leachon reporting for Mata ng Agila International. Trusted, connected, on point.
The Department of Foreign Affairs said Australian Foreign Minister Penny Wong will visit the Philippines next week. Foreign Affairs Secretary Enrique Manalo confirmed Wong will stay in the country from May 16 to 19. Manalo and Wong will meet on May 18 to discuss issues of mutual interest, including defense and security partnership. Wong will also pay a courtesy call to President Ferdinand Marcos Jr. and Vice President Sara Duterte. There are now 4 confirmed cases of XBB.1.16 Omicron subvariant or Arcturus in the country. Vin Pascua will tell us more about this.
The Department of Health or DOH logs 3 more cases of Omicron subvariant Arcturus in the country. The total number of confirmed cases is now at 4. DOH's latest COVID-19 biosurveillance report from April 26 to May 6 shows the newly recorded cases were in Region 6. The health agency earlier said the Arcturus variant has the ability to evade immunity. Experts also said the Arcturus virus is more transmissible. DOH believes there is a highly likely local transmission of Arcturus as there is a hike of infections. These cases have no linkages to international infections or no known history of exposure. The World Health Organization has labeled Arcturus as a variant of interest. DOH also reminds the public to follow health protocols to fight against the spread of COVID virus. Vin Pascua for Mata ng Agila International. Trusted, connected, on point.
Pag-asa has issued an El Nino alert saying the weather phenomenon might occur from June to August this year until the first quarter of 2024. In response, the National Economic Development Authority wants to study the impact of El Nino in the country's economy. Mean Corvero reports.
The National Economic Development Authority is studying the possible impact of El Nino phenomenon in the country's economy. The El Nino phenomenon is a seasonal warming of the Pacific Ocean that upsets normal weather patterns which causes dry spells. NEDA Secretary Arsenio Balisacan particularly singled out the agricultural sector, explaining it is vulnerable to droughts.
During these strong El Nino years, rice production could decrease by double digits. No? I think the highest that we recorded was something like 20%. No? But slight El Nino could cause agricultural production to decrease by 1%, 2%.
But Balisacan remains confident the country can successfully navigate the effects of El Nino this year.
We have experienced El Nino before and are confident that with adequate planning and preparation, we can successfully navigate it again this year.
The NEDA Secretary also considers the contribution of the agriculture sector as blessing in disguise. He says the sector contributed 10% of the country's gross domestic product, but Balisacan warns El Nino may affect the supply of electricity. He explains some of the country's power plants depend on dams. He insists there is a necessity for El Nino management.
The other part of the El Nino is if it impacts your supply of electricity, when to the extent that some of our dams are still dependent on water, or power plants are dependent on water in the dams. It's hydropower. I think that a good deal of that in Mindanao. And so it could affect the availability of power.
Mean Corvera for Mata ng Agila International, trusted, connected, on point.
Social Weather Station's March 26 to 29 survey reports in 1,200 respondents, 9.8 or 2.7 million Filipino families are starving. The figure is lower than the recorded numbers last October and December of 2022, settling at 2.9 million and 3 million respectively. Lowered prices in commodities are said to contribute to the ease in the figure. Philippine Statistics Authority reports that the country's economy strengthens after reaching the 6.4% growth domestic product. According to the Land Transportation, Franchising and Regulatory Board Media Coordinator Rowena Dincol, the Ligtas Pasada sa Kalsada aims to remind public passenger vehicle drivers to be careful and be safe with the passengers on the road. LTFRB personnel conducted the campaign by stopping passenger vehicles to give drinking water and pamphlets containing guidelines on safe road driving. Dincol notes that all drivers must follow all traffic rules to avoid road accidents. She says that the LTFRB monitors the roadworthiness of public vehicles before granting franchises, reminding drivers to be careful, keeping a stable physical and mental condition for the wellness of the public.
Ngayong buwan po kasi ng Mayo ay ginugunita po natin yung Road Safety Month. So namimigay po kami ng mga flyers na nag-aalaman ng mga ligtas pasada sa kalsada o road safety tips. At kasabay na rin po ito ng pamimigay namin ng mga tubig, ng mga bottled waters bilang pamatid-uhaw po sa ating mga tsuper o driver.
Coming up, Chinese warships sail around Japan ahead of G7 summit. U.S. borders not open as migrant rules change. And Turkish candidate withdraws to boost opposition bid. Stay tuned for more stories from around the globe when we return.
Biggest music event of the season is here! Summer Blast 2023! It will be a day full of cheers, and it will be summer you will truly remember. Get ready to jam with the hottest music acts and artists in the country. Featuring powerhouse performances from Glock 9, Sponge Cola, Lunar Lights, Silent Century, Jumanji, Soap Dish, Bandang Lapis, Sunkissed Lola, Dilaw, Noah Alejandre, Kalista, Eclipse, Goodwill Cast with Rise High Band, Rocksteady, plus surprise guests and many more. Summer Blast 2023. Let's all have an electrifying summer this May 13, 2023 at the Philippine Sports Stadium.
Welcome back to Mata ng Agila International. Pakistan Supreme Court held that former Prime Minister Imran Khan's arrest was illegal. The High Court also granted Khan's bail for 2 weeks. Khan supporters praised the court's ruling, saying that their leader is now a free man. Paramilitary troops arrested Khan on corruption charges, but his arrest sparked violent protests all over the country. As pandemic-era controls are lifted, migrants entering the United States without proper documents face long-term bans and possible prosecution. Homeland Security Secretary Alejandro Mayorkas says U.S. borders are not open. Mayorkas stresses that the new rules under the title and law pose tough consequences to border crossers, even to those requesting asylum. He says if anyone arrives at their southern border after midnight, they will be presumed ineligible for asylum. They will be subject to steeper consequences for unlawful entry. This includes a minimum 5-year ban on re-entry and potential criminal prosecution.
Our approach to build lawful, safe, and orderly pathways for people to come to the United States and to impose tougher consequences on those who choose not to use those pathways works.
The Title 42 policy put in place in January 2020 under a coronavirus public health emergency has been lifted midnight Eastern Time. Meanwhile, the United Nations Human Rights Council narrowly passed a motion to increase monitoring of abuses in war-torn Sudan. The decision was made in spite of intense opposition from Khartoum. The Council's 47 members voted for a resolution calling for an end to the violence and strengthening the mandate of a UN expert on Sudan. Votes tallied at 18 in favor, 15 opposed, and 14 in abstention. The resolution was adopted during a special council session to urgently address the violence that erupted in Sudan on April 15. Opposition justified their vote as they saw that it infringed upon Sudan's sovereignty. African countries urged findings African solutions to African problems. Backers of the text insisted it was vital for the Council to act swiftly. Pentagon top officials urged lawmakers to extend the federal borrowing limit. They believe a debt default would devastate America's reputation and embolden China. United States Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin also warns that a default will be a major blow to national security. Both he and Chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff Mark Milley support White House's 2024 budget request. Milley also expressed his concern over China's remarks that the U.S. is a country with declining power. Austin urges Pentagon's $842 billion budget request for next year is driven by their strategic competition with China. He says Pentagon's budget marked a 3.2% increase over 2023. It includes a 40% boost to the Pacific Deterrence Initiative, which aims to expand the U.S. military presence in China's backyard. Austin believes the budget is required to meet the pacing challenges posed by China. Analysts previously said China and Russia will seize the U.S. debt default crisis. They believe Beijing and Moscow will use the event to portray chaos within the United States. With the Turkish presidential race nearing its conclusion, we have some unexpected developments. We have Randy Bernardino with the details.
Muharrem İnce, a candidate in Turkey's presidential election, announced his withdrawal from the race. The move is likely to benefit President Recep Tayyip Erdogan's main challenger. Muharrem İnce is the leader of the center-left Homeland Party. He was one of 4 contenders running in Sunday's presidential election. İnce had faced criticism for currying favor from the 6-party Nation Alliance, which has unanimously expressed support for the candidacy of opposition leader Kemal Kılıçdaroğlu. Nation Alliance members welcomed İnce's decision to step down, expressing hope for a first-round victory Sunday. Kılıçdaroğlu called on İnce to join the opposition coalition.
Adaylıktan çekiliyorum. Adaylıktan çekiliyorum. Bunu memleketim için yapıyorum. Türkiye'ye 3. bir seçenek önerdim. Ne cumhur ne millet, tek yol memleket dedim. Ne sağdan ne soldan Atatürk'ün yolundan dedim. Bir kanal açmaya çalıştım. Bu kanalı başaramadık. Başaramadık.
Randy Bernardino for Matanang Agila International. Trusted, connected, on point.
Chinese warships sail for 12 days around Japan as tensions rise ahead G7 summit next week. Japan's defense ministry says a Type 055 guided missile destroyer Lhasa is leading a four-ship flotilla, including a small destroyer, a frigate, and supply ship circumnavigation clockwise around the archipelago. The ministry adds the voyage began on April 30 in the Tsushima Strait, which progressed through the Tsugaru Strait between May 5 and 6. Vessels were then spotted in the Izu Island chain south of Tokyo Thursday. Japanese Prime Minister Fumio Kishida notes that the peace and stability of the Taiwan Strait are vital, not just for Japan, but also for the whole international community. China slams the upcoming G7 summit next week, asserting the bloc's rules serve the vested interests of few countries.
说穿了，这一期所说的国际规则，就是以意识形态和价值观划线的西方规则，就是美国第一 G7 主导的小圈子规则。这样的规则服务的是 G7 等少数国家的既得利益，而不是国际社会的共同利益。
Foreign Ministry spokesperson Wang Wenbin says the G7 requests that China abides by international rules. He countered that the G7 are the ones violating and breaking said rules. Wang argues the United States has withdrawn from 17 international organizations, including UNESCO and the Paris Agreement. He also accused the U.S. of invading Afghanistan, Iraq, and Syria. This afternoon, China also announced they are sending special envoy to Ukraine, Russia, and other European unions. Wang reiterates Beijing's position as a mediator to solve the conflict between Moscow and Kyiv.
5月15日起，中国政府欧亚事务特别代表李辉大使将赴乌克兰、波兰、法国、德国和俄罗斯5国访问，就政治解决乌克兰危机同各方进行沟通。
The World Health Organization says Mpox is no longer a global health emergency. The announcement comes a week after the United Nations declared that COVID-19 was no longer a public health emergency. WHO Chief Dr. Tedros Ghebreyesus made the announcement yesterday.
The Emergency Committee for Mpox met and recommended to me that the multi-country outbreak of Mpox no longer represents a public health emergency of international concern. I have accepted that advice, and I'm pleased to declare that the Mpox is no longer a global health emergency.
Ghebreyesus adds that the virus continues to circulate and can be potentially deadly. Mpox is caused by the monkeypox virus. The G7 finance ministers meeting pushes through in Niigata ahead of potential economic turmoil. Mark Tapel has the report.
The G7 finance ministers and central bank governors meeting is expected to focus on strengthening the financial system against a backdrop of fears of a bank-led global financial crisis. The gathering in Niigata will deal with a number of issues such as the regulation of cryptocurrencies and supply chain resilience ahead of the G7 Leaders Summit in Hiroshima next week. The ministers and central bank chiefs in attendance will discuss plans to combat the tanking market, with participants likely looking to project a sense of calm and preparedness. While regulators and officials have consistently sought to provide assurances, economists have warned of brewing global financial crisis in the aftermath of U.S. bank runs. The G7 finance leaders are keen to have more developing nations play key roles in these supply chains. Japan aims to persuade G7 members to take concrete steps to launch a partnership promoting these efforts. Mark Tapel, for Mata ng Agila International, Trusted, connected, on point.
The United States has accused South Africa of supplying arms to Russia in a covert naval operation. U.S. Ambassador to South Africa Ruben Brigitte told local media that the U.S. is under the impression that weapons and ammunition were loaded onto the Lady R. The Lady R is a sanctioned Russian vessel that docked at Simonstown Naval Dockyard near Cape Town in December. The U.S. envoy highlights the mounting tensions between the West and countries and that have refused to condemn the Russia-Ukraine conflict or partake in sanction efforts. Brigitte also rebutted the resolution from the ruling African National Congress, which stated that the U.S. provoked the war with Russia over Ukraine.
The government of South Africa is in fact not non-aligned. Amongst the things that we noted were the docking of the Russian cargo ship Lady R in Simonstown between December 6th and December 8th, which we are confident uploaded weapons, ammunition onto that vessel in Simonstown as it made its way back to Russia, which does not suggest to us the actions of a non-aligned country.
Secretary of State Anthony Blinken says the United States is reluctant to follow Britain's steps to deliver longer-range missiles to Ukraine. Blinken explains there are concerns over training and maintenance. He argues Kyiv soldiers must be qualified to handle more sophisticated weapons. And if Ukrainians are not equipped to work on U.S. weapons, it will not help them to win the war. Blinken also asserts the U.S. has provided weapons to Ukraine to help them against Russia. Ukrainian Foreign Minister Dmytro Kuleba urged all Latin American countries to condemn Russian aggression against its country. During a two-day visit to Guatemala, one of the few countries that offered unwavering support for Ukraine, Kuleba addressed his concerns.
I called on the countries of the region to join the core group on the establishment of the special tribunal on Russian aggression against Ukraine.
Best interest of the countries of Latin America to follow the example of Guatemala and take principle to action.
It is in the best interests of the countries of the Latin America to follow the example of Guatemala and take principled position.
Meanwhile, in Thailand, billions of Thais will brave scorching temperatures Sunday to vote in an election that could return the country to civilian rule. The contest has seen the return of old characters like former Prime Minister Thaksin Shinawatra, who is fielding his youngest daughter as his standard bearer. Paitongtarn Shinawatra is a frontrunner for the prime minister position. New politicos like Pita Limjaroenrat, a Harvard-educated leader of a progressive movement that wants to curb the monarchy's influence. Polling trends widely suggest that the opposition will win a majority of votes, but that may not be enough to oust the military from power. The military government led by retired General Prayuth Chan-o-cha has gone to great lengths to tilt the parliament's eventual selection of a prime minister in its favor. The administration hedged its bets by granting itself the right to appoint members of the upper house. Even if voters choose overwhelmingly to reject the military, many analysts and activists believe that Thailand's conservative establishment, military and police allies, and Thai monarchy loyalists could still manipulate the vote in their favor.
แล้วขณะเดียวกันเนี่ยสำนึกคนชุดใหม่เนี่ยเกิดการเลือกแบบstrategic voter หมายถึงว่าการเลือกทางยุทธศาสตร์หมายความว่าคนก็เลือกพรรคการเมืองเพื่อเป็นแกนนำจัดตั้งรัฐบาลแม้ว่าอุดมการณ์ทางการเมืองเราจะชอบพรรคการเมืองนี้แต่ขนาดพรรคการเมืองที่ตัวเองเนี่ยยังคิดว่ายังใหญ่ไม่พอเนี่ยก็อาจจะเลือกพรรคการเมืองที่มีโอกาสจัดตั้งรัฐบาลใหญ่กว่าเช่น
Former United States Vice President Mike Pence did not hold back his words against U.S. President Joe Biden. The Congressional Oversight Committee claimed that Biden and his family allegedly received over $10 million from foreign nationals. Pence said while he was the vice president during the Trump administration, his son Michael was serving in the Marine Corps. He criticized Hunter Biden for working in foreign corporations. He also lauded House Oversight Committee Chairperson James Comer's investigation. Pence thanked Comer and Senator Chuck Grassley for revealing Biden's alleged corruption. Former United States President Donald Trump has refused to answer questions about who he wants to see as the winner in the Russia-Ukraine war.
Did you think at least one time he'd get up and say, I'm running for president? Where am I going?
In a Republican debate at New Hampshire Town Hall, Donald Trump refused to answer questions on whether he wanted Ukraine to prevail in its war with invading Russia. Trump also stressed that he has a good relationship with President Zelensky. He also added that if he is president, he will have the war settled in 24 hours. Meanwhile, former United States President Donald Trump is also appealing against a sexual case verdict. Trump's legal team filed a notice of appeal in Manhattan federal court. His lawyer, Joe Tacopina, argued that there were strong grounds for appeal. The New York jury awarded $5 million to Elizabeth Jean Carroll. They held that Trump sexually abused Carroll in 1990s and defamed her last October. Tacopina said the jury concluded after less than 3 hours of deliberations. He insisted Carroll failed to prove that Trump raped her.
Guys.
Up next, Mercedes-Benz plant shooting leaves 2 people dead. In Japan, unknown fireballs have been seen across the sky. And the United States announces plan to curb emissions from power plants. We've got more stories when Mata ng Agila International returns.
This portion is brought to you by Final Match Security and Investigation Agency. The biggest music event of the season is here! Summer Blast 2023! It will be a day full of cheers, and it will be summer you will truly remember. Get ready to jam with the hottest music acts and artists in the country. Featuring powerhouse performances from Glock 9, Sponge Cola, Lunar Lights, Silent Century, Jumanji, Soap Dish, Bandang Lapis, Sunkissed Lola, Dilaw, Noah Alejandre, Kalista, Eclipse, Goodwill Cast with Rise High Band, Rocksteady, plus surprise guests and many more. Summer Blast 2023. Let's all have an electrifying summer this May 13, 2023 at the Philippine Sports Stadium.
Meanwhile, this just in, Sudan's warring parties finally signed a deal committing to protect Sudanese civilians. The U.S. and Saudi Arabia mediated a negotiation. Officials said there is no ceasefire, but Sudan's army and paramilitary rapid support forces agreed to allow safe passages for people. The deal also covered protection of relief workers. Both parties also agreed not to use civilians as human shields. In other news, a 53-year-old suspect guns down 2 people at a Mercedes-Benz factory in Germany. Police report that the victims were both 44-year-old men. Mercedes-Benz confirms that the suspect and the victims were employees of an external service provider. In 2012, a shooting occurred at the factory site for technology firm 3M in Hilden, Germany, claiming 1 life and injuring 4. Authorities jailed a man for taking a selfie in Palevsky station. Footage shows the man climbing down the rails as a train approaches. Police say he confessed that he wanted an ultimate selfie with a train behind him. He was fined and jailed for 2 days. In Toronto, Canada, with thousands of people experiencing homelessness and at least 3 homeless deaths per week, the city is opening more doors to address the situation. Joshua Santinilla reports.
Starting this month, more affordable homes are opening in Toronto for people experiencing or at risk of homelessness. Deputy Mayor Jennifer McKelvey announced this week the opening of 84 new affordable and supportive homes at 222 Spadina Avenue. Residents will pay no more than 30% of their income towards rent. This new building will provide 24/7 on-site support services, which includes a food program, clinical supports, and life skills training. Nonprofit organization Homes First Society has been chosen to operate the said building. This project received initial funding and support from the federal government under the Rapid Housing Initiative. Toronto has received $440 million to create more than 1,000 new affordable homes for Toronto residents in need over the next 10 years. As of March 2023, there are over 10,000 people actively experiencing homelessness in the city of Toronto. In 2022, Toronto saw more than 3 homeless deaths per week. In Toronto, Ontario, Joshua Santayana for Mata ng Agila International. Trusted, connected, on point.
In Japan, unknown fireballs have been seen in the sky. According to the Okinawa Meteorological Observatory, no weather anomalies have been confirmed and that there was no information about the possible launch of a North Korean reconnaissance satellite or problems with the United States military aircraft. Eyewitnesses theorize that the object's fiery tail was longer than that of a meteor. A National Astronomical Observatory worker told the Japan Times that the objects were most likely rocket debris. India's ranking of 161 out of 180 on the World Press Freedom Index has raised eyebrows among critics. External Affairs Minister Subrahmanyam Jaishankar says people who made the list were biased. RT News correspondent Runjun Sharma reports.
World Press Freedom Index has slipped even further to 161 out of the 180 countries. And I'd say that India is not shocked. It's become rather predictable. These ratings, of course, are done by Reporters Without Border, that is a non-for-profit organization, also a global watchdog, so to say. But India isn't shocked. For year after year, we're seeing that India's ratings are only going down on that list, and India's leadership has sharply reacted to it.
I was amazed at our number in the ranking. I thought we had the most uncontrollable press. Somebody is getting something fundamentally wrong.
So, of course, that was India's Foreign Affairs Minister saying calling out the ratings bias, but also we heard from India's Information and Broadcast Minister earlier, who basically said that India has never really subscribed to any of these ratings. Now, what could have gone wrong for this further slip, the slip which is even below Ukraine, below Pakistan, below Afghanistan? It is essentially because, remember, earlier this year, India had gotten into a conflict with the BBC. What had happened was BBC had released a documentary on Mr. Modi and Gujarat riots that took place in 2002. Now, India banned that documentary to be screened from India, and subsequently what India also did was there were raids that were conducted on BBC offices in New Delhi, in Mumbai as well. Of course, what India said was that they were simply just following the law of the land and that it needed to be done. And nevertheless, one sees no reason why India could be put behind the list, say below Afghanistan. Remember, it's the Taliban regime there which rather want women journalists to disappear. Then we're also talking about Kyiv that would rather silence all the voices of dissent.
Although the Alberta wildfire season is only 10 weeks old, flames have chewed their way through twice as much land as the province would be seen burned in an entire year. And while firefighters have had a bit of a reprieve this week with rain and much cooler temperatures, the forecast for the next week leaves them feeling pessimistic. About 12,000 people have been allowed to return to their homes. Nearly thousands of people are still waiting for the green light to return. Firefighters from several other provinces are on the front lines, helping Alberta crews battle the blazes. The weather is a big factor as temperatures in some areas will jump by about 10 degrees above seasonal norms. And with the high temperatures coming the risk of thunderstorms, which could spark more fires. The hot, dry weather is also affecting neighboring British Columbia, which reported 40 wildfires burning on Tuesday or Wednesday. The Spanish government says it will spend more than 2 billion euros to help people in the country cope with the lingering drought. The situation worsened this year as Spain recorded its hottest and driest April. Officials announced in a news conference that most of the money will be spent to build water desalination plants and water reuse plants. The rest of the funds will be used to help farmers cope with the lack of moisture. Government officials hope that this will help the country avoid food shortages. Over the next 4 years, Spain plans to double the amount of water in urban areas that is reused from 10% to 20%. The government also plans to repair the country's leaking water infrastructure. It is estimated that leakages waste 15% of Spain's water supply. As part of the country's efforts to combat climate change, the United States Environmental Protection Agency, or EPA, announces plans to curb planet warming emissions from the nation's power stations. Beginning 2030, EPA's proposal would target fossil fuel electricity production with increasingly stringent carbon reduction requirements. This includes compelling some coal plants to directly capture pollution from their smokestacks.
Not only will this proposal improve air quality nationwide, but it will bring substantial health benefits to communities all across the country, especially our frontline communities, our environmental justice communities, communities that have unjustly borne the burden of pollution for decades.
Coming right up, Elon Musk to step down as Twitter's CEO. Scotland to start driverless bus service. And Gifted Hands, the Ben Carson story is something to watch this weekend. Catch the latest in business, sports, and entertainment when Mata ng Agila International returns. Elon Musk has chosen his successor as the new CEO of Twitter and plans to step down from the role within 6 weeks. Musk did not disclose the identity of the incoming chief executive, where he plans to transition to a role as executive chairperson and chief technology officer. The announcement comes months after Musk pledged in December to step down as the head of Twitter as soon as he found someone. After acquiring Twitter in October, Musk made major changes to the company and its platform. Previously, Twitter verified celebrities, politicians, journalists, and prominent figures on a case-by-case basis in an effort to authenticate their identities and prevent impersonation. Twitter partially reversed the subscription change last month by re-verifying some legacy accounts of basketball star LeBron James and author Stephen King. And good news, hooligans. Due to popular demand, Bruno Mars is coming back to the Philippine Arena a second time around. Day one has already been sold out, so what better way to celebrate than to announce an encore? Day two is set to take place the very next day at the same venue, the Philippine Arena, with the same thrilling experience. The highly versatile artist, musician, and performer is known for his smooth, soulful ballads, It Will Rain and Versace on the Floor, and his heart-pumping, bombastic anthems like Uptown Funk and 24 Karat Magic. Filipino-American multiple Grammy winner Bruno Mars will now have a two-day concert at the Philippine Arena on June 24 and 25, 2023. And here's something interesting. Driverless buses. The United Kingdom's first autonomous buses are due to begin carrying passengers in Scotland. Operators of the service say they aim to carry 10,000 passengers per week. The commute is between Ferrytoll Park and Ryden 5 and the Edinburgh Park train and tram interchange. Technically, it is not totally driverless. Policy Director of Stagecoach Bus Service says there will always be a safety driver on board.
First of all, the system's designed to increase safety. So the driver has now got 360-degree vision and the system can respond faster than a human can in terms of reaction time. And secondly, there's always going to be a safety driver in the seat even when the bus is driving itself, so that if there is a need for them to take control, they can take control.
And China launches its cargo rocket dubbed Chang'e-6 at the Wenchang Space Launch Center. The rocket will deliver fuel, food, and other supplies to 3 astronauts of the Shenzhou Crew 15 at the Tiangong Space Station. Tiangong Space Station was completed in late 2022. Chang'e-6 is said to serve future resupply missions, allowing to transport of bigger loads. Authorities say this marks the 9th vessel to visit the Chinese space station. And now that it's the weekend, you can relax with a TV drama throwback. Stephanie Mayo has her pick of what to watch.
Based on the true story of world-renowned pediatric neurosurgeon Dr. Ben Carson, this 2009 autobiographical drama, now streaming on Netflix, is a touching tale of humility, resilience, and determination. The humble doctor, played by Academy Award winner Cuba Gooding Jr., saves lives at Johns Hopkins Baltimore Hospital, including doing over 300 operations on children every day. Dr. Carson is also known for his breakthrough work separating Siamese twins joined at the head in 1997. This TV drama reveals the hardships Carson endured before reaching the peak of his success. Growing up in the slums with a single mother who cannot read, he was taught the value of faith and education, making his personal and career life truly inspirational. Stephanie Mayo for Mata ng Agila International, trusted, connected, on point.
And to end the week, here's a quote from Turkish novelist and recipient of the 2006 Nobel Prize in Literature, Orhan Pamuk. The beauty and mystery of this world only emerges through affection, attention, interest, and compassion. Open your eyes wide and actually see this world by attending to its colors, details, and irony. And that's a wrap for tonight's news. I hope you all have a happy weekend. Catch the latest updates on our social media channels for now, and see you tomorrow at the Philippine Arena for Summer Blast 2023. I am Ricky Matay. This is Mata ng Agila International. Trusted, connected, on point.